Hello and welcome to the Carolina Move podcast. I am your host, Christine Kozachuk, Realtor with KW Premier. If you are looking to buy, sell, or relocate to the Carolinas, give me a call at 704-208-9561. And today we have a special guest today, Keisha Arnette with Arnette Law. Let me bring her in. How are you today, Attorney Arnette?
I'm doing really well. I hope you are.
I am great. I'm excited for our listeners to hear the expertise that you have today on, questions that really needs to be answered because a lot of times, as a seller, we go into it blindly. And I was one of those a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. And there's so much involved in selling. It's easy to understand why you may have a lot of questions and a lot just going on with it.
Absolutely. So my first question to you is, you've helped so many people through real estate closings. What drew you to real estate law?
I always really just enjoyed it. A lot of real estate is a puzzle. It's especially the title side of real estate and what we do. It's putting together a puzzle and figuring out all the pieces to get to that end goal. And then that end goal is so great. It's such a joy to be a part of someone's journey. It's such a big step in someone's life. And so I enjoy the puzzle getting to that. And then the reward is getting to be a part of that moment for so many people. And it's such a privilege to get to do that.
I never really thought about that because when people are selling or buying at that moment, it's their dream, of purchasing a home or selling their home to purchase another home. Yep. So you get to experience all of that. That's really great.
Exactly.
So from your experience, what are some of the most common legal issues sellers face when they decide to sell their home?
Oh gosh. So disclosures are a big question that we get. What do you need to disclose? What do you need to tell people about your home? That definitely causes a lot of confusion just because it's kind of a hard idea to grasp. Title and ownership issues, lots of divorcing issues, family issue questions that can come up in that. Contract questions we get a lot of, and just the overall process. When am I going to get the funds? How am I going to get the proceeds? Just kind of the basic questions too.
That's very interesting. When you talk about title insurance, that's something I think a lot of people don't understand. I think that would be a great podcast just by itself.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
For sure.
Hey, in North Carolina, what are sellers legally required to disclose about their property?
So you're required to disclose certain material facts, and that's a really important word when we have that conversation because it has to be something that would be considered material to the home. It has to be something that's known to them, a material issue that's known to the seller and that would not be easily identifiable or discovered by the buyer throughout the process. They are required to disclose anything, whether lots of times that might be like a structural issue or something like that. They're required to disclose.
Okay. Now, what could happen if a seller fails to disclose something important, even if it's by accident?
So, accidents really don't count here. So if they fail to disclose, they could definitely have legal implications. They could have to put the buyer back in, if they're already under contract, they could have to put the buyer back in a position before that contract existed. So meaning giving them back their deposits or paying them back for any inspections that they've paid for or out-of-pocket expenses that they've incurred because they went under contract, they thought they were going to purchase this home. And if it turns out that you failed to disclose something, you could have to put them back to the start of that process. So you could have, just legal implications if you're failing to disclose, regardless of whether it was an accident or not.
That was my question. Even if you don't know it, okay. Does a lot of times, even if they don't know it, do home inspectors usually catch it?
Sometimes, not all the time. We hope that they do, but not all of the time, because some of these issues are latent issues. So, the terminology says that it's not easily discoverable, which is why we depend on the seller to disclose any issues that they might be aware of, because we may miss it for sure.
That's powerful. That's a very, very powerful question and answer to that, because a lot of people, even though it's an accident, you're still responsible for that.
Yep, absolutely.
So the next question is, Attorney Arnette, is when sellers receive an offer, what should they look at from a legal standpoint before accepting it?
Got you. So clarity in the information, clarity in the offer. There shouldn't be any questions as to the terms. There shouldn't be any, could this mean that or this? You should really have clarity in the terms of the contract. We don't want misunderstandings, because misunderstandings are what really can derail a situation. So we want to make sure that there's clarity in the terms and that we understand the terms. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people where they just didn't quite understand. And so you have to kind of slow down and stop and make sure that you're reviewing and understanding all of the terms in the contract.
Okay. Now, what are some common contract mistakes sellers make, and how can they avoid them?
I mean, it's really kind of goes back to the same thing. So, not fully reading or understanding it so that the terms catch you off guard can lead to a lot of issues and a lot of questions later if you didn't realize the closing date. So if you were presented an offer and it said 30 days from execution instead of an actual specific date, understanding what that date is, because you're obligated by it. So that you can adhere to that and make sure that you've implemented what you need to hit that date. So just making sure you're fully reading it and understanding it would be the most common contract issues that we see.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question that I have is regarding closing and legal protection. What are your top 3 tips for sellers to protect themselves legally before, during, and after the sale?
Before, I would say at the very start, once you think you're interested in selling, is finding a listing agent that you can work with, that you trust, and that will treat the process the way that you need it to, whatever that is for you, finding that person that you're going to work well with. So that's before. And then trusting that person, communicating with that person. If you have an attorney that's working with you, making sure that you're communicating and telling them your whole story. A lot of times things will come up throughout the process that really we should have known from the outset. So you're separated and haven't seen your spouse for 10 years. That's something that we really would love to start the process knowing instead of finding out at the end. So, trusting the people that you're working with and making sure that you're telling them the full scope of your story. Being ready to respond throughout the process. Lots of things involved with selling your home are timely. They need a timely response. So making sure that you're available, making sure that that you're in constant kind of contact and communication with your agent, so that you can respond when you need to. And then probably just disclosing, making sure that you've disclosed everything that you need to disclose. Those material facts that we talked about, making sure that you've understood that and disclosed everything so something doesn't come up throughout the process and the buyer finds something that you should have disclosed. And then we've got to talk about the legal implications of that.
Okay. Yeah, the material facts, I always say that's a hot button and it's a hot topic always.
It is, absolutely. And it can be hard to explain the difference in what's material and what's not. And it can be hard for a buyer to understand. So there are lots of scenarios where, the buyer might consider something material that's not. So you want to make sure on the sell side, you've got clarity about the issues and whether or not you have to disclose it, and you've disclosed them.
Okay. That's great. Now, what role does a real estate attorney play during the closing process for the sellers?
Yeah. So we really serve as a resource for the seller and the agent, the listing agent, if there are any questions that come up, if they need us to review any contract any addendum or amendment that comes up throughout the process after you're under the original contract. And then we prepare the seller documents, so the conveyance documents, the deed, the lien waiver, anything like that needs to be prepared for the closing. We would prepare that and communicate with the buyer's attorney to get to the closing table.
Okay. Okay. Now, how can a seller make sure they're being honest and compliant without oversharing or scaring away a buyer?
Oh, that's so hard. I totally understand that. When I've sold before, it definitely can feel like you are oversharing or giving too much information that maybe you don't need to. I think just a lot of this really just goes back to me to making sure you fully understand and that you've had those conversations with your agent and your attorney, if you have an attorney involved, and walking through, North Carolina has the general real estate disclosure that's going to walk you through questions. So walking through that and making sure that you've answered those questions as honestly as you can, then I think that you've done what you're supposed to do.
Okay, great. So now the next question is, we're getting ready to close up here in a few moments. If you could give one piece of advice to every seller in North Carolina, what would it be?
Read and understand. I think if we read and understand, then that solves a lot of issues that are going to come up, all the way from, material facts. If we're reading and understanding that disclosure, to are we reading and understanding the contract? We get lots of conversation about, even a buyer that might be delayed past the original closing date. There's a clause in the contract that gives the buyers a grace period and a time period after the closing date. If we've read and understood the contract beforehand, that would not come as such a surprise if we get to that in the middle of the process. So a lot of the issues that come up throughout closing, if we've made sure we've got a really good understanding of that contract up front, we would at least know what to expect and it wouldn't catch us off guard. And I think anytime that we can know what to expect, it's always going to be smoother.
That always comes back when I remember when I was in school, when I first started, right? Taking the real estate class, and the instructor, the whole entire time that we were in class, words matter. And to this day, that is like branded into my brain as words matter.
They do. I mean, if nothing else, if you can understand what you've signed and understand the terms, you're light years ahead of where most of us would be. So that's my number one tip, because it solves most of the problems.
Absolutely. So I have one more question before we close. And how can our listeners reach you if they have any questions or need legal guidance for sales?
Of course. So our phone number is on the screen, 919-747-2208. You can always email us at office@arnette-law, or you can email the attorneys at arnette-law.com also.
Okay. Is there any final words?
I think just having, like we talked about, having people around you that you trust. So find your agent that you want to work with, find your attorney that you want to work with, and make sure that it's someone that you're comfortable with, someone that you can talk to, so that you can be honest with them about whatever it is you're going through, whatever reason you're selling, because that really helps both of us serve you in that scenario. So, find your people, find who you want to work with, and hopefully you'll have a really smooth transaction.
Attorney Arnette, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to, give your expertise to our listeners today, because so many sellers, even myself, when I sold a couple years ago, wish I had this information before I even sold my home and things like that. Thank you so much again. My name is Christine Kozachuk. I am the Realtor with KW Premier. And if you're looking to buy, sell, or relocate to the Carolinas, my contact information is at the bottom of the screen. And thank you again so much, Attorney Arnette, for being a part of this podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.